ahead. Dear Lord, we ask your blessing on this port, the people that depend upon it. We ask that you bless this board and guide us in our decisions that they are for the betterment of those we serve. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Please face the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank everyone for being here this evening. This is the August 22nd, 2022 meeting of the Lake Charles Harbor and Terminal District meeting. The board encourages public comments and questions regarding all agenda items. Persons wishing to do so should complete a speaker's card, which is at the entrance to the boardroom. When speaking or asking a question on an agenda item, one should, in addition to completing the card, come to the microphone, be recognized, and provide your name, address, and phone number. Comments by individuals will be limited to 3 minutes. It's a fairly short agenda for this evening. The first matter on the agenda is approval of the July 25, 2022 regular meeting minutes.
I make a motion to approve the July 25th, 2022 regular meeting.
Motion by Mr. Darbone, second by Mr. Guidry. On any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And next is submission 2022 -044. Mr. Self?
Yes, sir. We have a proposed board policy on funds recovered from legal proceedings placed in a legal fund account for specific appropriation by the board. The commissioners have asked that we provide this policy to you, which I think you have in front of you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt submission 2022-044.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Creelow, second by Mr. Prudhomme. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Submission, resolution passes. That brings us to briefing notes. First briefing note is, I guess, there were a couple, do you want to go straight to the briefing notes? There were a couple, I think Judy had some.
Magnolia LNG.
Okay. All right.
We've asked, just for your knowledge, we've asked different entities at each meeting in the future to make a presentation for some of these mega projects that we have lined up. A few months ago, we heard from Lake Charles Methanol. Last month, we heard from Lake Charles LNG. Tonight, Magnolia, Mr. Bagley's here to give us an update on their project.
Thank you, Mr. Self. Mr. Bagley, would you don't feel bound by the 3-minute rule that I mentioned earlier?
Yeah, okay, well, I will keep this brief, and thank you very much for a chance to
Thank you
speak
for
with the
being
board.
here.
So I'm John Bagley, I'm Chief Operating Officer of Magnolia LNG. I've been associated with the project for 8 years now, which starts to sound like a long time. I really expected us to be up and running by now, but the markets are challenging, but improving. So just kind of a brief update, a couple of topics. I'll start with regulatory because that's extremely important to these projects. We, of course, have our FERC order in place. We did renew our FERC order, and so it's valid until 2026. And so, and in the process of renewing it, we were able to also increase the capacity of the facility by about 10%. And so originally we had it authorized for 8 million tons. Now it's authorized for 8.8 million tons. And that incremental amount does actually help the economics of the project also. So it's quite beneficial. Other regulatory areas, Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, the air permit. Our air permit was submitted for renewal and has gone through the regulatory process. We got a draft renewal permit for it about, I want to say it was about 10 months ago. There were a number of public comments were issued into it, Interestingly, none of them from the Lake Charles area. They were all kind of national comments into the air permit. LDEQ is responding to those now, and we expect to have that permit, the renewed permit in place by the middle of October. And that's really up to the timing of LDEQ, but they are going forward with it. Other permits on the project remain valid. We do work quite diligently. Coastal use permit, Army Corps 404 permit, et cetera, are all up to date and maintaining the project in a ready status. On the EPC, to go forward into the EPC, some of you may or may not know we had KBR, Kellogg Brown and Root, as our EPC contractor. They designed the project and signed an EPC contract. But in the intervening time, they decided to exit the lump sum turnkey engineering, procurement, construction business. So they actually don't do that work anymore, not just LNG projects, but in any projects. And so consequently, we are currently in the process of reinstating our EPC contract with a new contractor. So that's an active process today that we expect to have completed probably within about 2 months. We should be in a position to have a contractor selected. And that's not an exact schedule. A little bit of it's market dependent on how the contractors come back to us. Sometimes they ask for a little more time. But we see good interest. This is a very busy market we're dealing with now. I'm sure, particularly with the folks associated with the port, you know what's going on in the region. And Lake Charles remains a very positive place to do business. And so contractors are busy, but we're quite certain we'll have that in place. Like I said, selected in about 2 months, and then there's a process where they go through, revalidate the design, and give us new pricing on it, and that takes several months. Which kind of brings us to the commercial agreements, and that's what's always been the challenge for the project, getting them in place. About 2 years ago, the Magnolia project was acquired by an energy infrastructure company called Glenfarne. Glenfarne is a fairly large company. They have operational power assets in South America. They have operational gas gathering and pipeline business in the United States and a little bit in Canada. About 660 employees in the company, so it's quite a substantial organization. The nice thing about Glenfarne, from my point, is associated with Magnolia, is they're also an energy import project developer. So they currently import project LNG into Colombia, and they're looking at gas to power projects both in Asia and South America. So in addition to looking at the market, which is in the LNG market, selling LNG directly into the market, Glenfarne also enables us to basically control our own destiny by creating a market for our own product. And so the combination of an increase in the market demand currently, together with our own internal demand, really gets us online, and that's why we launched the EPC process to get a contractor back in place, because we're getting to the point where we think we can get forward with that. The broader market on selling LNG, if you follow the news at all, with the, I'll use politely the word invasion of Russia into Ukraine, this caused quite an upset in the global natural gas business. About a third of Europe's energy came out of Russia, and they're now trying to shut that off entirely and replace it primarily with U.S. natural gas. So that's really put Lake Charles on the map as a location to get this from. And so prices are high in the market, which helps. And this has also increased demand in Asia, because Asia is actually very concerned that Europe's going to take away all the LNG from the U.S. And so it's looking like a very positive market. So that's kind of the summary. Of course, I'm available for questions either now or afterwards. I'll be around. We would like, from a project standpoint, to offer to provide the port with a quarterly briefing. We can either do this in person or we can do this in writing, but we'd be very pleased to keep up great communications with the port. We know you're a great supporter of the project, and so we suggest we can provide you with a quarterly update and quarterly briefing on the project. And that's all I had prepared.
Any questions?
Do you have any kind of a estimated timeline on when the final movement forward, assuming that the permits happen in October?
Yeah, we,
The
we,
pieces come together like you described it?
yeah, we do. I think every time I answer that question, I lose a little credibility, but nevertheless, we kind of work backwards, and the reason we launched an effort to get an EPC contractor in place now is working backwards, as basically somewhere between mid-2023 to the end of 2023, we think we're in a place to give the notice to proceed to our EPC contractor. And so really, we take that time. It takes him 6 to 9 months to validate the design and do the pricing. It's a big job to put together a nominally $5 billion lump sum turnkey bid. And so it takes them about 6 to 9 months to do that. We hope 6. Then working back a couple months to get the contract in place, the contractor selected, so we can put that contract in place. Kind of puts us in that time frame, and that's also where both our internal demand and where we think the market demand exists to get for the project to go forward. So we've actually kind of timed this for when that point in time is we think we're ready to go.
Thank you.
So following up with that question, so believe it was Lake Charles Methanol also lost their EPC contractor, and we're here making a presentation. And as I recall, they said it's almost like starting from scratch. In other words, the new EPC will not use engineering designs from another firm. Is that what you're finding in your search?
We're going a little different path. I think what they're telling you is what's normally the case. In the case of Magnolia, we actually got about 30% through the EPC engineering. And part of our tender process is to find a contractor who's basically willing to step into the shoes of KBR and carry the project forward. We'll give them time to validate it, but we don't really want them starting over. We really like the work that was done. We like the design. It's highly energy efficient. It doesn't emit much CO2. There's a lot of, it's a very compact design. There's a lot of great things, and we really want to build what KBR designed. So part of our tender is we're requiring our EPC contractors to basically kind of pick it up and carry forward, not start over. So what they're telling you is generally true, but what we're doing is pushing the contractors in a different direction.
And you feel at that point, 6 to 9 months, you will have enough contracts obligated that you can move ahead with final investment decision?
That's our current projection. See, the key is we got in a position with KBR where we managed to get a contract executed, and then it has a certain validity, and we couldn't get the offtake contracts in place within that validity, and so then we had to ask them to extend and extend and extend, and what we're trying to do now is to time everything so it comes together at the same point. And so really, if you kind of go 2 months for us to select a contractor, 6 to 9 months for them to get a contract in place, that puts us between mid and the end of next year, and that's the timing when we think we'll have the offtake agreements, both our internal demand and also external parties in place that we can go forward. So that's the, knock on wood, that's the plan forward.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions, comments?
Okay.
We definitely appreciate you coming.
No, thank you
Give us
very
the
much
update.
for your
We
time.
look forward to the
Thank you,
quarterly
sir.
updates beyond.
Okay. Well, that brings us to FEMA briefing note.
Will, July financial.
I'm sorry, let's see.
The financials? Just go into your
Do the
financials.
financials? Okay. Okay, so for the month of
July
July, we generated revenues of $3.5 million, which was favorable about $700,000. We saw higher dockage revenue at city docks, additional revenues related to the transfer of petroleum byproducts, and a settlement payment received for damages caused at one of the port's docks. Expenses were $2.7 million, which is unfavorable, about $400,000. That's just due to our method of recording the hurricane expenses. And an additional contributing factor relates to the cleanup of that Fournette Street property, which we talked about last meeting. Depreciation was about $100,000 favorable just due to the timing of completion of some projects. Non-operating revenues and expenses were favorable, $600,000. That's due to the timing of the Port Wonder project going forward and some higher interest rates causing higher interest income. EBITDA was $600,000, and we had cash flow of about $1 million. On the balance sheet side, it's kind of the same thing we've seen pretty much all year. Changes due to the GASB 87, the P3, FEMA GOSEP, and then ongoing hurricane projects. So unrestricted cash was down $4.8 million. Restricted cash was up $1.5. Government receivables, which has to do with the GOSEP, as well as the Port Priority Program, was up $3 million. Fixed assets was up $11.9 million. Construction in progress was up $14.7. Those are due to the completion of projects as well as the ongoing projects, a good portion of which are hurricane related. So those are the items of interest. That's pretty much it right now.
I want to add I want to highlight a couple of things that Cameron just mentioned in the financial statement overview. Our revenues year to date, as of July, are $12.7 million. That's $3.6 million higher than they were. And when I say revenues, I'm only speaking of the vessel and cargo services revenue. So vessel and cargo services revenue are $12.7. That's $3.6 million favorable or higher than they were at the same time last year. That's 40% increase, pretty significant increase. Operating income is similar, about a $4 million increase compared to last year. So we're certainly trending in the right direction, both in terms of tonnage and revenues.
And that's primarily wood product and steel?
No, it's across the board. We're having a record, the steel is new this year, wood, we're having a record year as far as all the wood that we're handling, and BT1, we're higher at BT1, Petcoke, and Bayrite.
But weren't we down last year? Aren't you comparing it to
2020,
down?
2020 was low, 2021 had improved, and 2022 is more improved.
Okay. I'm sorry.
You'd mentioned, Cameron, some of the things affecting the balance sheet, the P3 are the partners. Is all that up to date, or where?
You mean as for receiving the cash?
Yes, because the port's actually the one.
Holding, right. We're holding the funds on behalf of the P3.
Right.
We do have a couple that we have not received payment for. We are in touch with them to receive those payments. Everyone else has paid.
I think there's two that haven't paid.
Correct.
And there's no dispute, it's just about getting the check.
Timing.
That's right.
Yes, sir. Anything else?
Anything else on this? All right. And that brings us to FEMA and GOSEP.
We've asked Glenn LaFawn to provide you an update as far as where we stand with FEMA.
He provided us with a handout.
Thank you. Mr. President, other distinguished members of the board, good to see you all again. Happy to report that to date, we've obligated a total of almost $52 million in projects. That's gross amount. We've had to subtract the insurance reduction that you've received since the port received nearly $46 million in insurance. We want to make sure we don't have any duplication of benefits, so FEMA reduces each project by a certain percentage until we hit that $46 million. So far we're almost at $31 million. So the eligible obligated is almost $21 million, it's $20.9 million. After your cost share, the 10%, that leaves $18.9 million that's available to the port. Once you expend those funds, you see page 2 and 3, we're having to go. Good news is we have to go to the second page for the obligated list of the damage inventory so far. and it's going to continue to grow. Like I said, it's almost 52 million now, and that was the first disaster, Hurricane Laura. Since we came on board, we also handled a second disaster, Hurricane Delta. It was small, it was only emergency work that was done. That was a total of $367,000, and the third disaster was Winter Storm Uri, the ice storm, and that was another $215,000. That disaster's already been closed out. Currently, right now, we have about $25 million being reviewed by FEMA CRC, and right now, just two very large projects we're working on is another $56 million. Go to the state page, it's the second from the end. It shows so far that amount eligible is $20.9 million, and the federal is $18.9 million. To what's been deposited so far in the port's bank account has been $5.2 million. One thing I looked up on...
Let me ask you this real quick, Glenn. On that state page where you show the red section of unpaid, am I correct in saying that it's not necessarily unpaid, but we just haven't, we're not going to get reimbursed that until we spend the money ourselves?
That's correct.
So essentially it's not owed at this point by GOSEP until we spend the money?
No, yeah, correct. The money's
Okay.
obligated, it's sitting there in GOSEP's account, and once the port expends those funds on a project, the port will submit what's called an RFR, request for refund, and they'll get paid that amount. So
I just didn't
it's
want you
there.
all to think that GOSEP was sitting on 72% of our money.
What percent of our money are they sitting on?
I think
As of
Cameron's
right
got
now, it is around $4 million that, of that 13 million, there's about 4 million that we have spent. Some of that is 428 funds, so those are going to be spent a little later on, like 4, 5, and 6. So those are not spent yet. So around 4 million is what we're working on receiving.
And to answer your question, we had 2 very productive conference calls with GOSEP over the last 2 weeks, and we would anticipate
It was 2.2.
2.2 million very
Of
soon.
the four.
Yeah, of the 4 million, very soon. And Glenn, before we go on beyond that, you had mentioned in an email something about the volume that has been approved or obligated statewide.
Yeah, for Hurricane Laura, so far for permanent work, this is permanent work, and not emergency work, which would be debris, emergency measures. So all the permanent work, the buildings are the majority of it. So far, FEMA's obligated a little over $141 million towards this disaster.
Statewide, correct?
Correct, all applicants. So it's not clear if it's the gross amount. If it is, the port has 51.7 million of that. If it's the net amount after our insurance reduction, it's still impressive. We have 20.9 million. So that's all obligations so far for permanent work in Hurricane Laura is a little over 141 million. That's on the FEMA website.
So I guess the point is, we've got a pretty significant amount of our projects that have already been obligated through FEMA if you compare it to the amount that, as a state, has been obligated.
So in other words, you're doing well.
Is there a rule of thumb on what the lag time is from when the work's done to when the reimbursement is requested to when you can expect to actually receive the reimbursement?
Well, that's been one of the problems that we've had recently, or the port has had in dealing with the reimbursements from the state. Once the project gets obligated, it's taken a little too long to get the money into their coffers. So is that what you're asking?
It depends on the situation. Some of the questions, at our last board meeting, we talked about some of the challenges we were having with GOSEP related to old projects and old contracts. And in the most recent conference call we had with them, they confirmed that if it's a contract, as an example, that expired 2 years ago or a year ago, it's a dead contract, and there's no further work or amendments that we need to do to that contract, and they'll move forward with our reimbursement. So really, we've had 2 great calls with them in the last 2 weeks. And we had those with the director of GOSEP statewide. Mr. Casey Tingle was on the call for one of them, and then the second one was with a group that really does kind of problem resolution. And they both went well.
Yeah, the lines of communication are open, and that's usually where you can solve the problems that you're having. So it's good to see that everybody's talking and trying to work through the difficulties that we're having. You know, we have the FEMA difficulties in the state, but hopefully everything gets worked out. Any other question?
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interrupt before we move on, Mr. Woody Daigle from Senator Kennedy's office is here and asked if he could introduce himself to the board.
Please.
Hello, thank y'all for having me. As he said, Woody Daigle. I'm the regional representative for Senator John Kennedy. I cover 6 parishes in the Southwest Louisiana region. Anyway, I just wanted to introduce myself. I've met a couple of you individually at some other events, and know Mr. Self from way back. Anyway, we can help out with some issues from a federal side, possibly. When it comes to FEMA, we're dealing with other entities in this area that have not been so lucky as to receive as much as you guys have. There's a lot of money still out there that FEMA owes to this area, and our office is trying to track as much of that as possible so we can make a case to the FEMA district, Mr. Robinson. Anyway, I'll stick around afterwards and introduce myself personally to you guys and come say hi and give some cards. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them right now. I don't want to take up too much time. But thank y'all.
Thank you for being here. And also want to notice and want to thank Mr. Dennis Barty with the police chief for being here. Thank you, sir. Okay, moving on to department reports. Cameron?
Yes, sir. I'm just going to kind of piggyback off the FEMA GOSEP part. Since producing my report, actually last Thursday or Friday, about $8.2 million in projects were actually obligated after insurance deduction. Our 90% share is about $3.8 million, so that's good news. We're seeing some movement, and those were the 428 projects that I had mentioned. Those had been tied up for a little while due to a time extension that we were waiting on to go. The state had to approve, FEMA had to approve, so that finally got done. So we got some more obligated. You'll see that on next month's report. So, so just some good news on that side.
Okay. Any questions for Cameron? Navigation, Channing?
Good evening. In addition to my written report, I'd like to give you an update on the channel funding. We've finally got finished with fiscal year 22. Our initial ask for the year was $35.55 million in operations and maintenance and $9 million in construction. $9 million was in the president's budget, made it through the congressional budget, so there was no issue as far as construction was concerned. The president's budget for O&M started out at $20.5 million and was cut back by Congress to $17.5 million. So our ask was $35.55. The budget Congress passed was $17.5, so we're at maybe 50% of what we needed. As it has done in the past several years, Congress gave the Corps discretionary funding. And the Corps gave us an additional $19 million in discretionary funding, which sounds like a good deal, except they restricted it all to use on the saltwater barrier. So we are still looking at 50% of what we needed for O&M. A lot of scrambling went on. I'm happy to report that the Corps was able to find an additional $21.6 million in funds to give us for operations and maintenance, which brought our total to $39.1 million in unrestricted operations and maintenance funds compared to the $35.55 we asked for. The difference will be some cost increases that the Corps recognized as this process went along. And we still have the $19.5 million for the saltwater barrier. So all in all, we're in good shape for FY '22, and we are pursuing FY '23. We've got another trip up to DC scheduled 13th, 14th, and 15th of September. That's all I have. If anybody has any questions,
I'd like to add one thing to Chaney's report, and while Woody's here, we want to thank our congressional delegation for working to get the 9.8 million, I think it was 9.8, additional funds to get us, really to make us whole for fiscal year '22. Not only are we made whole for fiscal year '22, we still have the funds available for the saltwater barrier. So we appreciate the congressional delegation's work.
Very much. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Chaney? Or anyone?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. Operations, Todd?
Yes, sir. In the past month or so, we've at city docks, we've had one cargo transfer for 22,500 tons. This is some shipments of vacuum gas oil that we've been handling at city docks. I think that's about our 6th one that we've had. They indicated they want to try to do one a month, which is really good revenue for the port with no expense.
It's essentially a new cargo for this year.
It is. It is very new. It started about December of last year. And they're actually getting the oil from Calcasieu Refining, so it's a local deal. We unloaded 6 aluminum trihydrate barges for about 7,000 tons. We had 2 lumber shipments for 23,462 cubic meters. And then we had the 1 rubber shipment, which is the first ever break bulk rubber shipment that went to Spain. If all goes well, they're hoping to do about maybe 4 to 5 more of those, which will be going to South America. We had another steel shipment, Project Cargo steel ship that went to Israel. There's 1 more that should be coming next month. In the future, we've got another lumber ship booked. We've got 2 ships and 6 barges of hydrate. It will be about another 46,000 tons of hydrate, and another different type of cargo transfer. It's going to be about 6,000 tons. At BT1, we handled 2 rutile vessels, about 16,500 tons. We loaded 14,500 tons of green coke for Phillips, and loaded a fuel coke ship that's about 33,000 tons. Coming up, we've got booked 1 ship and 1 barge of calcine that's about 9,000 tons, and 4 coke ships that's going to total about 105,000 tons of pet coke, and another Bayrite ship that's about 29,000 tons, and there's another ship that's scheduled to come. We just don't have a tonnage on it. And then there's a ship for port aggregate that's scheduled. We also got an email today from Farmers Rice Mill. Looks like they're trying to book another 3,500 tons of milled rice in totes. And then I've been working with a company we've just about got it settled. I'm still a little hesitant to say it's a done deal, but we're looking at moving about 10 shipments of coated pipe through the port. Be about 300,000 cubic meters, the largest shipment that I've ever heard of coming through the port. So it'll be coming in by vessel and then going out by truck, going to DeSoto and to Manny and someplace else in Beauregard Parish. So it's a big deal, so hopefully we can get that tied up and get that cargo moving through the port.
Expect to know soon?
I do. I should know in a few months, yes.
Keep our
Any
fingers
questions?
crossed. Any questions for Todd or? Thank you, sir. All right, next, we'll hear from Terrence on cargo and trade.
Yes, Mr. President. Over the last few weeks, we submitted 3 projects for our industrial Park East property. One was for a precision machining company. The other was for a electric vehicle and lithium battery manufacturer. And the third was a home furniture and furnishings manufacturer. Next week, we have the Louisiana Forestry Association meeting. 2 weeks following, we have the Pulp and Paper Industry Conference, which alternates between the U.S. and Europe every year. End of September, we have Breakbulk Americas Conference, which is the largest breakbulk conference in the U.S., and we'll be featured in the ad and port profile that will be handed out at that conference. Mid-October, we have the Offshore Wind Conference, and also an advertisement in the North American Energy magazine, which will be distributed at that conference. Tomorrow, we have the LSU Ag Center bringing in the 4-H group. Wednesday, there's a trade mission from Central America that will be visiting the port on Wednesday, which is escorted by the U.S. Rice Federation. And as Todd mentioned, we're working on the 3,500 shipment ton of rice for September, October. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Terrence. Nick, engineering?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. In addition to my normal monthly update, I wanted to confirm with you that Shed 7 demolition and asbestos abatement is complete. The contractors left the site. We've already done the topographic survey to begin the design for the new building that will be placed on there. And in the interim, it's going to be used for open storage for cargo. Also, in addition to the FEMA and GOSEP, I just wanted to give a quick update on the other funding sources, Port Priority and the Southwest Louisiana Hurricane Relief Fund. We've been submitting to those as applicable for the projects that they apply to, and just those reimbursements are coming through very quickly, and they've been great to work with.
We actually spoke with the treasurer at the legislature Friday and personally thanked him for having those funds processed so quickly.
That was all I had.
Very good. Any lobbying report? I don't believe so. Executive session?
Mr. President, I move we go into executive session.
Second.
All right. Motion by Mr. Creelow, second by Mr. Darbone, I believe. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. We will be in executive session.